Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now for about £50, roughly $70, you could probably find a graphics card that will produce some half decent frame rates in games. The RX 580 or GTX 1060 comes to mind. But can you get an entire PC for this price? And can you get one that can pump out more than just a few FPS? Well, hopefully this thing can do just that. This magnificent machine is an HP 285 G3 Micro Tower. It looked a lot bigger in the picture, is a phrase I've heard before, but that definitely applies here. It's very compact. I love the look of these all black PCs, but truth be told, they are a nightmare for those of us who like to customise and tinker. The 285 G3 is as proprietary as you can get, from the power connectors, the board headers, to the shape of said board itself, with its built-in front USB ports. We do have a PCI Express X16 slot though, but we'd be limited to cards that will play nice with the 180 watt, albeit gold rated, power supply. Unfortunately, our budget doesn't allow for such luxuries. Luckily though, the CPU has got us covered. Inside this old office system is a Ryzen 5 2400G, which has 4 cores, 8 threads and RX Vega 11 graphics built right in. Back in early 18, this and the 2200G were fantastic additions to the world of graphics cardless PC builds, especially compared to the shudder A12-9800, an earlier AM4 socket CPU. I think the 4-core 4-thread 2200G was £99 here in the UK and the 2400G was around £149. The latter wasn't always worth the difference back then, but these days 8 threads will really help you out. Alright, so this machine arrived with a single 8GB stick of 2666MHz DDR4. I don't think the system supports higher speeds, but the capacity and single channel mode may be problematic. Having said that, I was still quite surprised that both CS2 and Fortnite ran with at least 30 frames per second. Before we add more RAM, I'd like to mention the BIOS, which is pretty basic as you can imagine. I updated it to the latest version from the HP website, but I still couldn't find an option to allocate more system memory specifically to the iGPU. The integrated GPU should take all it needs from the system memory anyway, but there are conflicting opinions on whether manually reserving more system memory for the integrated graphics improves performance. Nonetheless, it's not worth dwelling on because it's not possible. What will definitely improve performance though is dual channel RAM, and not only that but doubling the capacity. We have a single 8GB stick in here, but DDR4 is pretty cheap these days. No point being too picky though on our budget. I headed straight to CEX and ended up with a stick of Crucial for £6. This added over 15 FPS to our average frame rate in CS2 and over 20 FPS to the average in Fortnite. I would say the percentile lows vastly improved as well, but not really. 1080p is probably a bit much for the 2400G and Vega 11, especially these days. This statement doesn't really apply to Counter-Strike because it performed the same at 1080p, 900p or 720p for some reason, and enabling FSR made the frame rate worse. Not sure what was going on really, but this was best left as it was. In Fortnite, dropping the resolution to 80% with the performance mode API and lowest settings makes the most sense, and allows us to hit over 60 FPS pretty consistently without destroying the graphics and turning enemy players into about 4 pixels. I must say this PC is whisper quiet. Even under load the stock fan doesn't make much noise and the temperature is absolutely fine. A bit of classic Skyrim next. I steered clear of 2016's Special Edition in favour of 2011's more hardware lenient original. I also decided to be a little bit daring by choosing the medium preset here. I expected about 45 FPS on average at 1080p, but the 2400G handled this one like a champ, delivering just under 60 FPS overall. The game is capped at 60 FPS by default, which is for the sake of the physics I believe, but there were plenty of times when we hit this limit, even in intensive fighting scenes like this one with a dragon, which ultimately saw me get destroyed, but not my frame rate though, that remained pretty smooth. Grand Theft Auto 5 Legacy Edition, or the original version of the game, runs pretty well too. Again, it's an older title, but it's still incredibly popular, so it's nice to see it running rather well on this low-cost computer. These aren't even the lowest settings. Well, nearly, but we have actually set the detail sliders to halfway, and anisotropic filtering was also set to X8. We got a buttery smooth experience. It was super consistent as well, with great percentile lows. There's probably no point trying the enhanced version because we can't make use of the newly added ray tracing options, and yet performance will still be a bit worse. Next up I tried Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and this is not the sort of game you should throw at a system like this. That said, I did manage to squeeze at least 30 FPS out of it by dropping the res to 900p and enabling FSR performance mode on top of that, so I can only imagine what the internal resolution is here. I expected it to look like when you close your eyes and rub your eyelids, like a blurry mess of colours and shapes. That wasn't actually the case, it still looked half decent. Well, acceptable anyway. And considering the hardware, I'm pretty happy with 30 frames per second. Back to a more sensible choice of game now with Apex Legends. I wasn't expecting much, but I think I've underestimated the 2400G today because it delivered 60 FPS as part of this cheap HP pre-built. To hit this, we needed the very low texture quality, everything else set to its respective lowest, and dynamic resolution enabled with a 60 FPS target. The resolution didn't appear to be dropping massively during gameplay, so that's a bonus. Stardew Valley next, and yeah, no issues whatsoever. I've set my desktop display to 1080p 60Hz, as I figured we certainly wouldn't be achieving more than that, and of course the game had no issues with hitting this basically all of the time. I've just discovered that this is on Game Pass, so I'll be playing a lot more of this now. I think it's a great one to play for those of you with lower end systems. We'll finalise with Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, just like Kingdom Come Deliverance, I dropped the internal resolution to 900p and enabled FSR performance mode. Now, this is using an older version of FSR, so it doesn't look as good, but it still looks a lot better than dropping the internal resolution to 900 or 720p. It's certainly a bit sharper, well, a lot sharper to be honest. Now, this again isn't the sort of game you should probably have in mind when using a system like this, but I was surprised to see at least 30 frames per second, and overall I don't think it looked too bad. It wasn't completely horrible, so that's always a plus, right? Now, it wouldn't cost much to improve the performance of this system, even when taking the 180 watt PSU into account. I'm sure there are a handful of low profile cards that would probably work, and the Ryzen 5 2400G itself is actually still pretty good. You're not going to be playing the latest and greatest games with a rig like this, but it's nice to see that it can handle some of the most popular titles out there, despite the visual sacrifices that we sometimes have to make. It's always fun putting together a low-cost PC, even when said PC requires minimal effort, but my advice would be, if you're looking at pre-builts with the intention to upgrade, just be sure you know what's going on inside the case, as you may be hit with proprietary connectors, low power PSUs, and maybe some other weird shenanigans that are going to prevent you from upgrading, locked BIOSes, stuff like that. Now, of course, prices will vary. I actually saw this one up for £50 and I got a discount code from eBay, which took it down to about £47.50 overall. Plus, when we bought the RAM from CEX, that brought us up to just over 50 quid. So yeah, not bad at all in my opinion, especially considering the processor still sells for half of this all by itself. Let me know your thoughts down below as always. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.